Morning. Morning, everybody. Any questions while we're waiting for everybody to come in? Okay, if nobody has any specific questions, I'm gonna go over the assignment again that's coming up, the draft for Monday. So that's the literacy narrative. You're gonna tell me a story. Let's look at it and see if anybody has any questions.
How long did you say it was supposed to be?
You're gonna be aiming for 3 pages, double spaced.
Okay.
Okay, which ends up being about 750 to 1,000 words.
Okay. Thank you.
MLA uses Times New Roman font 12 point. So basically it's a story. You're gonna tell me a story from your life that says something about how you feel about reading, writing, language. Okay. Basically write a story critically considering your relationship with language. Who's your audience? We are your audience. So you have to assume what we know and explain things that we may not know. The main focus of your paper should be something to do with language. Open form prose is just informal sort of conversational writing. You have the option to include dialogue if it helps convey your story's purpose to the audience. Okay, let's go look. Alexa's having trouble finding the quiz. Let me make sure it's actually visible to you guys. So to take a quiz, been a while since the syllabus quiz, first week. Did you go to quizzes, Alexa?
Yes.
Says that you guys should be able to see it. Does it say, there's no quiz listed that says Malcolm X quiz?
I don't think so. At least on my Brightspace app, it doesn't say anything about Malcolm X.
Which class are you looking under?
English 111.
Okay, I'll try to figure out what's going on. Has anybody else tried to access it yet? Maybe I didn't assign it yet. One moment, please. Let's try this and see if that helps. Try refreshing your page if you're still on it and see if it shows up. Reagan says she can see it maybe now. Should have been active. I didn't put a specific like activation date on it, but I am still figuring out Brightspace. Thank you for letting me know. There's a late assignment. Somebody said that the first draft is showing as late for the literacy. I'm not sure what's going on with that either. I got to check that out this morning. All right, I know I changed the date on that, but maybe I didn't save it. Okay, good. You see it now, Alexa? Yeah, that was due the last semester in February. So I need to go update the due date. So don't worry about the late notice. It should fix it after I update it. Okay, good questions. Anybody else?
For the lab, it shows in the grades for Brightspace that it's like all the same assignments, but like there's zeros for everything.
Yeah, I will gradually enter those as you guys go through the exercises. Since you started doing sets of exercises, I have to transfer over the grades from Khan Academy.
Okay.
So you don't have zeros.
Okay.
Excuse me. Yeah, they'll eventually show up there. And I will post a kind of an explanation of how I'm incorporating those grades in a bit. Oh, is that what it's doing? So I fixed one assignment and not the other. Well, you only have to submit it in one place. I'll delete the other assignment. Somehow it transferred over twice. Fabian said that there's two assignments showing up for the first draft. There should be one showing up for the first draft and one showing up for the final draft. So I will look at those after class and get them fixed. And if they're not fixed by tomorrow, we'll take a look at it in class. All right, let's talk about all the places that you encounter language in your life. See if we can find as many ways as possible. You can yell it out or type it into the chat. I will start with reading, right? Talking. Writing. Yep, listening to other people. Yeah, making sense out of the world through language. Thinking about it. How about music? Like song lyrics. Movie dialogue. Can anybody like recite parts of their favorite movies? I have friends who do that. Well, and then those ideas, those, I don't know, sayings permeate our society. They become catchphrases, right? Anybody deal with small children? They're learning language. Sometimes the ways that they interpret are interesting.
So is our paper about like when we were growing up, what language did, or like now?
It's up to you. It can be either or. It can be
Okay.
how you were influenced by it as a kid. I want you to tell a story that's interesting to you, because usually if you're interested in it, it's easier to make it interesting to us. Now, when I give this assignment, most people will focus on reading and writing, and that's fine. But think about it. If you like to get kind of creative, you can also focus on things like how, I don't know, I have a soundtrack of certain periods of my life. Like, what was the music that was coming out when I was in high school, when I was in college, right? The nostalgia, language triggers nostalgia, right? But like also with talking, the conversations we have can also be influential ways that help us understand language. Someone mentioned a timeline yesterday. Yes, it can be, but I prefer, like, I don't, you can use it as a technique, but don't use it like as a substitute for transitions. Does that make sense? So instead of writing something like January 12th, 1970, I would you could start the paper that way, but then you say the next year when I started kindergarten, as a high school student. Does that make sense? Because we want to work on transitions to written transitions. Yes, Fabian, yeah. The reason you learn another language, yeah. And the differences in language are really interesting. I'm reading a translation of a Chinese book right now. And apparently there's a word in Chinese for a teacher's teacher, but we don't have one in English, which makes me want to go get one. That makes sense. Like, so because the translator's like, there's really no word for the teacher's teacher. I don't know, maybe mentor, but still that generally indicates a teacher figure and not the teacher figure of the teacher figure. It's a little confusing. I'm not sure we deal with that concept a lot. And a lot, in at least as I've been encountering the Asian cultures, it's hierarchical in terms of like what people know and who has seniority. So that's very important. I'm not sure it's as important in American society. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is seniority important in a job or a school? Like generally when they meet, they decide how old everyone is so they know the structure of who's in charge or who's, yeah, I don't think I've ever had that situation in America. Anybody
Is
from a culture like that?
Is
Go ahead.
seniority like a placement system?
Yes. So like the person, like if you're in school, there's a term for people who are, I mean, we call them seniors, right, for high school, but it's very specific in terms of recognizing who people, and it like that influences the way they understand the world, right? So like when you meet somebody, you decide who's the oldest person, and then yes, they're sort of like in charge of certain things, you know, and the youngest person gets all the crap jobs, usually, at least from what I've seen. Now,
Mm.
I'm encountering most of this through television. So I don't know if we can imagine encountering America just through television and how that would distort our culture. Oh, I realize that this is not a single story of China, but I've seen in a lot of Asian cultures that still, even on the reality shows, figuring out the order, the birth order or the experience order is very significant. Like if you are senior to somebody, like I've seen actors like work out like how long each other have been in the industry. I don't know if anybody watches, Netflix has a lot of Korean and Chinese shows and I love them. So they work out like you've been in the business longer, therefore you're my senior. Does that make sense? I had no idea this was as important as it is in the certain cultures. Yeah. So for them, and also there are 2 levels of speaking. Okay, yes, that's one thing I wanted to talk about, Emmeline, is how would you set up, like, let's look at the introduction that Adichie used in her speech, because her speech is also a story, right? So whenever I show you a TED Talk, they also always have a transcript of it. So if you feel like you missed something or a part of it and you want to go back and look. As for the example, I'll bring an example tomorrow to class, but I can give you some examples of topics people have written about. Let me do that and then we'll look at Adichie's introduction from the TED Talk. So I had someone who is a first generation American, which means her parents are not from America. So she speaks Polish. And so she talks about being, you know, how do people encounter her as a second language speaker. You know, they want. She was like, they always want to know all of the curse words in my language, right? And you know, just the perceptions they have of people who speak other languages and are from other countries through language. Okay, so I also had someone write about the letter they had to write to apply to an American school in English, and how significant that was in their life. I've had people read about, write about book series that they read in elementary school and how that introduced them to a love of reading. Or conversely, how they were assigned certain books. I was not in love with The Crucible in high school. Did you guys still have to read The Crucible? Anybody familiar with that book? Might be an old curriculum. So some people develop a hatred of reading through books they're assigned or being forced to read. Oh, so you guys read Animal Farm? We did 1984. That's George Orwell. Both of those. So I had someone do the whole thing about how songs have been a comfort to them at different parts in their life, the language. Comfort, therapy. I mean, do you listen to certain songs when you're angry or happy, or like, I'm always asking, I have Alexa and I'm always asking, like, give me a cleaning playlist. I need some music for cleaning. You know, that's usually not like soft or slow music, right? It's hopefully peppy music. Anybody listen to songs when you're sad? I like Johnny Cash when I'm sad. Who do you like when you're sad? Juice WRLD? That's just the idea that the lyrics, the language gives an outlet to our feelings, right? That could be the whole message of the essay. And then you would use examples of songs and the lyrics in them to show how they give an outlet to your feelings. Does that make sense? Is 1984 better than Animal Farm? I don't know. I would have to think about that one. More sad. There are more sad songs. Country music, yeah. I have a friend who used to listen to heavy metal when he was angry. Yeah. Express punk your through punk or different your frustration or anger. I mean, it's pretty much their songs are used in politics. They're sometimes controversial. Some musical artists don't want their songs associated with a certain politician or event or idea. But songs are literature. Does anybody know the songwriter who got a Nobel Peace Prize a few years ago? Not Nobel, excuse me, Nobel Prize for Literature. Got Peace Prize on the brain. Just for the songs that he wrote. Anybody find it? Yeah, Bob Dylan. He started, writing in the 60s. Maybe before that. I don't know as much about his songwriting. So it doesn't just have to be about reading or writing. You know, there are lots of ways we encounter language. Lots of language is used to manipulate people. You know, rumors are used, you know, sometimes negatively against people. So let's look at how Adichie starts her essay. One second. So here's the transcript. Everybody see it? So her first line is, I am a storyteller, and I'd like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of a single story. So she pretty much introduces her main concept up front, but she's got that nice short sentence for emphasis. I'm a storyteller. Okay? I grew up on a university campus. My mother said I started reading when I was 2. I was an early reader. Okay? I read British and American children's books. I really like, remember when we talked about reading as a writer? I like the parallelism she has. Like, I'm a storyteller. I was also an early writer. I was an early reader. So she has some ideas that she expresses in a parallel way. Okay. And when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories, pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kind of stories I was reading. So she starts thinking about, you know, you don't have to start with your childhood. You can talk about the first time you encountered language, or something about language that taught you something any point in your life. But she started with like the books that she encountered and how they shaped her worldview and her idea of what writing was, her single story. And that was, it was written about white characters doing things that they do in their countries. And, you know, eating apples, which she did not eat, having, you know, dreary weather, which she generally, you know, she did not have. We didn't have snow. We ate mangoes. We never talked about the weather because there was no need to. Okay. So we've been talking about introduction techniques, right? So does anybody have an idea what they want to write about? Then, like, Emmeline, if you have an idea of what you might want to do, we can talk about how you could begin it. What intro technique would work best for the story you're going to tell? A lot of times a description one will, and you can try out a couple when you're doing your draft. Okay. Adichie's giving us background information, basically, right? I am a storyteller. Here's how I read a lot when I was a child. Here's what I picked up from reading. So give me a story you might tell, put it in the chat, and we'll talk about some potential ways to start. About traveling? Yeah, encountering different languages, like I encounter Chinese through the television shows. I might write about the differences in language between the two cultures, you know, so that I can show that language has given me a deeper understanding of a different culture, right? So I could see that happening when you're traveling, Fabian. Are you talking about a lot of travels and pulling it together with like one theme, or a specific place that you traveled that you want to talk about? A lot of travels. So you can pull it together and like with one thing, like food. What is the language we use toward food? You know, in different countries, and does it reflect different attitudes toward food? Language with age. Orlando, explain more what you're talking about. How your language changes with age?
Kind of like how as you grow up, you kind of develop a different language, if you will. Like your language as a high schooler is different language as if you're in sixth grade, or
This sounds intriguing. Yeah,
yeah,
the way that you talk to your friends and like, of course, like
and your adults and peers and things like that. It's all different.
that would be interesting to trace. Yeah,
Yeah.
that idea. So
Wait.
you go ahead.
Yeah, so that's basically I just it's kind of hard to I don't really know where to start because it's kind of like a timeline, if you will. So
Well, I mean, you don't necessarily have to start like with being a baby, you know, if you wanted to start there, but like it sounds like you started like maybe with elementary school, right? So you can start with like dialogue. It sounds like yours would lend itself really well to giving us like little snippets of dialogue. Does that make sense? That shows the
yeah,
difference in the way that you talk to people. So maybe you could start with like, I don't know, what is the first age that you're thinking of? What age? Kindergarten or younger?
yeah. I was just thinking like from like when we start to interact with other people, so
Mhm.
probably around there.
Okay. Yeah, there's actually some interesting studies about how we talk to each other, how men and women talk to each other, how people in different authority levels talk to each other, how friends talk to each other, you know?
Interesting.
So yeah, that would be interesting. I would just start at the beginning with the chronological order like we talked about yesterday, and
Okay.
give us like an example of what were you obsessed with when you were in kindergarten? I don't know if I was obsessed.
Playing,
Planes?
playing.
Oh, playing? Yeah. Like what? Sports or?
Yeah, I guess,
Mhm.
or just with friends or something like that.
Yeah. So you could start with, what your conversations were full of, maybe.
Okay.
Uh, Sometimes you have to kind of write it to see what would make a good introduction, or sometimes we'll read it and go, ooh, this like third paragraph, if you moved it up here, would make a really good introduction.
Yeah.
You could start with your main idea, which is language changes as we age. You think it gets more sophisticated?
No.
How does it?
Maybe actually. I don't even know. I don't know.
You may have to explore it in your shitty first draft before you figure out kind of what you think. That's okay.
Or are we posting a first draft first?
Yes,
Okay, that's what I thought.
this will
Okay.
just be the first draft due next Monday. Emmeline, you're thinking about writing about how you hated to read because you thought it was too hard. Oh, and then yeah, that's a common story of one book and a teacher changed it. Yeah, that's a perfectly legitimate story. I want to see this teacher also. So like, we'll talk about how to incorporate things like description, but like, don't forget examples. So for Orlando, for yours, you'd give us lots of examples of conversations at different ages. Adichie gives us examples of different times when she had a single story and made a mistake, or other people had a single story about her, right, and made a mistake about looking at her just from one viewpoint. Have you guys seen the discussion question? I'm basically asking How someone has had a single story of you. So basically, one perception. So I used as the example, I'm an English teacher, and many people in my life know this. But then some of them become afraid to speak around me because they're afraid I'm going to be correcting them. I know some English teachers do that. I don't correct people if it's not my job, like in my life. Now my kids, I don't pick on them too much, but once in a while they'll do something. But generally, I don't want people to be afraid to talk to me. But they have just this one concept of like everything. I'm not listening to everybody all the time through the frame of being an English teacher. So maybe your parents have one view of you that maybe doesn't comprise how you're getting older, you know, or your friends, right? Or your employer. So I just ask you to think about one time you felt like someone was looking at you through one dimension. I have a single story of students. I have to remember there is more to the students. You have one of teachers, right? Generally. It was just interesting, you know, to see how we form the ideas we have about people. The Khan Academy activities, I always give you the last 10 minutes of class to work on. I've assigned, if you've gotten through the exercises, I've assigned some new ones and I'm giving you a deadline. You know, basically you have a week to complete each set of exercises. So you can work ahead if you want. I'll try to give you guys plenty of time, but they're not all due next week. The due date should be on them. But tomorrow in class, we also are going to talk more about how to start the paper. And you don't always have to start at the beginning. I know I'm talking about introductions, but you don't have to start at the beginning. You can just start with a place you have. So like Orlando, if you have an idea about a certain conversation that really reflects something, start there and give us some dialogue and then explain how we should look at the dialogue. So don't forget the three things, you know, examples, descriptions, explanations of your thinking. Someone asked about formatting. We're going to start talking about that for the MLA format. I will give everyone a template you can use, or you can format it on your own. But basically, MLA doesn't have a separate title page. On the first page, you'll have a set of information on the left. Everything is page numbered, and I'm going to go through all of that in class for everybody tomorrow. We're running out of time right now. So I have about a minute left. And then the last 10 minutes, I'll let you work on the Khan Academy exercises. Do you guys have any questions about starting the draft or anything else? They're due each week on Tuesday. So like there's a set of exercises due today and there's a set of exercises due next week. And it should say on the assignments when they're due. So every Tuesday, you'll have one set due. All right, I'll hang out here if you have questions. Otherwise, I'll let you go ahead and work on the exercises. So I'll be here the last 10 minutes. I'll start a new session. All right. Otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day.